Good day everyone and welcome back to the 2021 Nestbox series. Straight away we're seeing Miley bring in some breakfast for the chicks, but again he has a lot of trouble feeding them. I actually have to speed a section of this up as he takes quite a bit of time. Just look at the clock. Poor Miley really just has some trouble getting these chicks to feed sometimes. But thankfully he does eventually get one of them to feed. That whole process took just under 2 minutes. I've also noticed that sometimes the chicks hear Miley arriving before he actually lands in the nest. And when he arrives, Biddy generally takes that opportunity to go out and find some food herself. So you've probably seen by the thumbnail that we have some drama tonight. Biddy leaves the nest in the middle of the night, and as it's too dark, can't find her way back to the nest. She really has my heart broke, this bird. But there's a whole day's activity to get there before that. I took this opportunity to zoom in on Biddy. Just look at her face. She's nearly lost all her feathers just at her beak. But otherwise she seems quite healthy. I'm not 100% sure the reason for this. It's usually the males that lose their head feathers during the season. We see Biddy here again, hear Miley's approaching, and leaves the nest promptly. He then arrives, and then heads into the nest to feed the chicks. And thankfully manages to get the feeding done. And back again in just under a minute or two. That's more like it. So thankfully there seems to be a little bit more food making its way into the nest these couple of days. But even in saying that, from seeing from previous years, there only seems to be just enough. And here again we see the chicks hear Miley approaching and explode out from underneath Biddy. These are ever hungry mouths to feed. We can hear later on in the day that some of the rain has returned, unfortunately, and this again will be affecting the volume of food that these chicks are able to receive. So a little bit of interesting behaviour happens in the next sequence. A wasp or a bee lands in the hole of the nest box. Now unfortunately it didn't set off the outside camera, but just look at Biddy's reaction. That behaviour only ever happens to another bird or something that they think they can scare away. But if a bigger bird like a magpie or rook or something like that arrived at the hole and was trying to get in, they would hunker down and proceed to not move. Thankfully it seemed to work here for Biddy, and it proceeded to scare away that wasp or bee. And that's how that day really played out. Plenty of food came in. Well, when I say plenty, enough food came in. I always think they could be feeding the chicks a whole lot more. I've seen parents in the past coming in and out constantly throughout the day, with literally no breaks in between. But we have to remember that this is a bad year for Bluetits from what it seems. There's been a lot of failed nests across the country, and it's just been terrible weather for them, so I really think they're stacked against it. But they also show signs of inexperience, and we'll get to that tonight when Biddy decides to leave in the middle of the night. But first, let's just see how Mork and Mindy got on that day. She's incubating her eggs for the most part of the day, but every so often pops out and brings in a bit of soft material like you've just seen. Her chicks are only gonna know the soft things in life. And she was giving me the impression that she was going to be a more experienced bird, but we won't know that until her chicks hatch. And Mork is showing all the signs of being a responsible male, bringing in loads of food for Mindy when she's feeding. And this brings us to later that night. And if you look at the clock, it's 11 minutes past 12. And Biddy is starting to look a little bit restless, and she's hopping up and down from the nest. And usually they don't do this during the middle of the night too much. And what proceeds to happen confuses me to no end. I've never seen it happen, and I don't know why she decided to leave. But she does eventually leave, so she sits back down, and I was, when looking at this, thinking, great, she's not going anywhere. But then look it. She hops up to the nest hole and starts to look out eventually. And when I was looking at this, I was asking myself, what in God's name is Biddy at? I've never seen or heard of a female bird leaving her chicks at this age at night. But she sits back down. Has she decided not to leave? Unfortunately not. She suddenly decides to get up and leave. And what you have to remember when looking at this is pitch black. And 8 minutes later, Biddy realises she can't make it back in the nest. A full hour and a half goes by and she tries again. With still no luck. Another hour passes. And you can see her there in the tree trying again. And you can see her here climb up the branches. I'm sure Biddy is desperate to get back to her chicks, and her chicks are in desperate need of her warmth. And thankfully, when the sun starts to arrive at around 4 o'clock, she makes her way back in. Those chicks have been left for just under 4 hours at night on their own. I was 100% that they were dead. But thankfully, I was wrong. Just look at the chicks when she's removing a bit of waste from the nest. We have movement out of both chicks, but they're not out of the woods yet, as I'm sure some of you who have raised chicks in the past know. A cold chick is a very hard chick to feed, and Biddy and Miley experienced this. When a chick is cold, their energy levels are at an all-time low. Biddy here unsuccessful in feeding, and she ends up eating the food herself. 10 minutes later or so, and Miley gets the same treatment. He looks to be very puzzled about this. Biddy, thankfully, starts warming up the chicks. They still look to be too cold at 5 to 6. 5 minutes later, a small bit of movement from a chick, but still an unsuccessful feeding. So how long does it take? Well, 48 minutes later, thankfully when a bit of food is brought in by Miley, one of the chicks starts gaping for food. That chick has obviously been warmed up sufficiently enough that the metabolism is starting to work again. And thankfully that chick gets fed. And Biddy is rewarded with a fecal sack. An hour later, so I'm still only seeing one chick raise or gape for food. I don't know if it could be the second chick or them gaping one at a time. It's very hard to tell, and I couldn't really make out whether it was only one chick gaping or indeed both of them at different times. But thankfully at 5 to 2, if you look closely, you'll see 2 chicks gaping for food there. So that means they have been being fed. I have to say, Biddy and Miley are sending me on an emotional roller coaster this year. I still don't know what Biddy was thinking leaving the nest at that hour of the night, and the fact that the chicks survived after 4 hours at night without any heat. It is really beyond me how they managed to survive that night. It was a mild enough night, but nonetheless amazing. So let's go over to all our safe place, Mindy and Mork's, where things are going all by the book at the moment, which is just great and very welcome if I do say so myself. She is still minding her 7 eggs and incubating, along with bringing in some soft material here and there. And with that, I want to say a huge welcome to the great number of subscribers that I've got in the last while. You're very, very welcome to the page, and I hope you are enjoying the videos. And indeed continue to do so. And with that, I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one. Bye bye.